Baby, can't you hear my call? I can't stand.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Sims. Welcome to another edition of the Hey Now podcast with my sons, Jarrett and Jordan. Jordan, he's got schoolwork. He's making it happen. He's getting after it. You got to love that. And today we welcome in a special friend, one of the great baseball players during his time. How about this? Let me run down some of these credentials. First round pick of the Mets in '67, 15-year career, 282 batting average, 246 home runs, which ranks 20th all time among switch hitters. OPS plus, if you're into it, plus OPS plus of 132. That is really good. 4 times top 10 MVP voter, balloting, 3-time All-Star. Great years with the Orioles. We'll talk about the 79 World Series, but they'll talk about the 83 World Series as well when they beat the Phillies. Ken Singleton joins us right now after a great baseball career, great broadcasting career. Spent 25 years with the Yankees. He tried to retire 2 times before the third time finally worked. We'll get into that. Kenny, thanks, my friend. Really good to see you, man.
David, happy New Year to you and your family, and it's great to see you as always. I'm looking forward to this upcoming season when I maybe get you out on the golf course here in Maryland somewhere. In a couple of days, I'm headed to Florida. It's too cold there. There's snow on the ground. I got to go.
Hey, man. Hey, 20-something degrees. I know that's not good for the bones or your young bones.
It was 18 this morning.
Too cold. Woo! Yeah, well, we'll catch you either on the golf course in Baltimore or Tampa.
That sounds good.
Yeah, so we got a couple opportunities here, and we'll get this done. Kenny's born in Manhattan, raised in Mount Vernon, New York. New York, great career in baseball. Yeah, give me your early beginnings in baseball. I mean, was your dad an uncle? Who was
it? It was my dad. Of course, when I was very young, there were 3 teams in New York. The Dodgers were there, and my dad, of course, was a Dodger fan because of Jackie Robinson. And they were on TV all the time, those little black and white TVs. And, they had Jackie and Roy Campanella and Carl Furillo, Duke Snyder, and Gil. They were a great team. They just couldn't beat the Yankees. They beat them one time in the World Series.
Right.
But that was my start. And I can recall like it was yesterday, my dad taking me across the street to the playground in Manhattan and pitching to me. And I could hit the ball, I could hit it. And some of the older kids were coming around and saying to my dad, "How old is that kid?" And my dad said, "He's 4." And they said, "Whoa, he's 4? He can play with us." So they were 10, 11, 12 years old, and I was holding my own with those kids.
Were you switch hitting?
No, I wasn't. In fact, I hit left-handed, and I even threw left-handed. But what I saw was the other kids were hitting right-handed and throwing right-handed, so I thought I was doing something wrong. So I tried that, and through Little League, I only hit right-handed and threw right-handed. But when we got to the Bronx Federation League, one of my coaches saw me fooling around in batting practice, hitting left-handed, and he said, "Why don't you try it in the game today? There's a right-handed pitcher." And I hit 2 home runs. He says, "You're a switch hitter from now on." So, and it stuck.
That is tremendous. And yeah, I noted. I just want to jump ahead on one thing. Your 246 home runs, 20th all time among switch hitters. That is, you got a lot of guys on that list. I mean, Mantle's up there, Eddie's second, Eddie Murray.
I think when I retired,
I
retired, Dave, I was 3rd. So some guys have passed me.
Yeah, that's really something. So first round pick of the Mets, 77. Yeah. What was that? What was draft day like? What do you remember?
Well, we were sitting at home in Mount Vernon, New York, with my dad. I kind of knew I was going to get drafted. It was the January draft at that time, and there were 2 drafts.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to get drafted by my hometown team. My dad. Dodgers were long gone by then, so my dad was a Mets fan. And the Mets weren't very good at the beginning. They were awful, but they had a good minor league system. I was in there with players like Nolan Ryan and Gary Gentry, Jerry Kuzman, Amos Otis, Tim Foley. All these guys eventually made it to the big leagues, and we had some good minor league teams. My first year in the minors, we won 98 games, and you only played 140. So
Wow.
We had a very good team, and I just moved up the ladder and eventually got to the Mets.
What role did your dad play in the early part of your career? Um, and sort of what was that relationship like in terms of instilling the foundation that propelled you forward from there?
Yeah, that's a good question, and but I will say this before I get to it. I miss my dad a lot. He was super. He's the one who introduced me to the game. It always was on TV. He showed me, even at a young age, if he wasn't home, if he was working, how to get the TV on and how to get to the Channel 9 WOR in New York so I could watch the Dodgers. He was he was he didn't get much opportunity to see me play little league and things like that, pony league, because he and my mom were working so hard. But at the tail end, when they retired, they moved to Baltimore, and they got to see the last 3 years of my big league career. So the payoff was at the end for them, and being near their grandkids. That's why they moved to Baltimore from New York, and they lived only 10 minutes from where I am now. Of course, they've both since passed away, but they were a great influence on not only on me over growing up. It seemed like every decision they made with our family, it was me and my brother, it was the right one, and they were a great influence on my kids and their grandkids. They were unbelievably good.
That's beautiful. How cool was it when you knew? I guess what was like that first time you knew your old man was in the stands watching you play for the Orioles?
Yeah, playing for the Orioles.
Yeah,
Uh,
after he moved out, I mean, then
okay.
he became
Yeah. Well, my dad was going to root for me wherever I was playing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I'll give you a good story. When I came up with the Mets, we were playing on Father's Day at Shea Stadium, and we are facing Jim Bunning of the Phillies. And Bunning
Oh,
had pitched a
Hall of
perfect
Famer.
game on Father's Day against the Mets a few years before, and he was pitching again that day. Well, my dad had about 8 or 9 of his friends with him, his colleagues at work. And I went over to talk to them before the game near the railing, near the stands. And one of his friends called me over and said, Ken, your dad's very proud that you're a big league ball player. But if you turn out to be half the man your dad is, you're going to be really something special. And, that showed me how much my dad's colleagues thought of him and the type of man he was. And believe it or not, I hit a home run that day off of Jim Bunning. Maybe the longest home run I ever hit. If you can remember, Shea Stadium went over the bullpen in right field, and it went out, rolled out near
Whoa!
the subway stairs up to the subway.
Yeah, the bridge up to the
Oh,
bridge. Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
crushed that
Oh,
ball.
that's a
I still think that's the furthest ball I ever hit.
fastball,
It
breaking
was a
ball. What was it?
fastball. Well, it wasn't fast enough.
Nice. Oh, good for you. Good for you. Jared, a couple of years ago, we were married from Baltimore, and Kenny, I guess it's not that long ago because you had
Yeah.
just retired, and we were going to play golf. We got rained out, so we had breakfast. Somehow, some way, we're talking baseball, and I must have mentioned, or maybe Kenny mentioned something about the '79 World Series, and just once again to prove that athletes don't forget anything. And that 70 up 3-1 against
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, and that still grinds on you, and I get it.
Yeah, we should have won that. I think David and Jared, we got too overconfident, especially the way we won our third game. We came back with a rally, and I think it was the 7th, 8th, or 9th. It was a late rally against Pittsburgh, and we came in the clubhouse, and we were shot out of a cannon. We felt like, oh, this is over. They can't beat us now. We had our 3 best pitchers going the next 3 games if we needed them. Turns out we did need them, and it turns out Willie Stargell would not let them lose. Even though we lost that World Series, I still feel that at least we got there. We got to the World Series. I mean,
Hey,
in those days, it was the
here,
Yankees, the
here.
Red Sox, and us every year. It was
No doubt about it.
it was a drag-out fight every single year with them. One of those years with the Yankees, we went into the last weekend. We were all still alive, and we were playing Boston up at Fenway, and the Yankees were playing somebody in New York. And we eliminated, I can't remember the order, but we were eliminated Boston on Friday, and they eliminated us on Saturday. And on Sunday morning, Earl Weaver's in the clubhouse, and he's got this telegram. I don't even know if it's real or not. And he's reading it, and he says, "Congratulations on a great season. We will see you all next year. Billy Martin." He tore that thing up, threw it up in the air. I can't really say what he said, but he said to the effect that we're going to get those guys next year. And we didn't. The Yankees won again, but in '79, we did get there. And we got to the World Series.
I recently ran into Rick Dempsey's son,
Oh,
John.
yeah.
And we're on vacation, and I sit down, and Jordy was there, and this guy, I look at this guy, and he says, "Oh, so this is the guy that's the Eagles fan." He says, "I know a little bit about baseball." I said, he's an Eagles fan. He lives in Philly area, and he says, "My father was the MVP of the '83 World Series." I drew a total blank, and then he said, "Rick Dempsey." I went, "Duh." Dempsey had a hell of a series for you guys. In '83.
Dave, he usually batted ninth, so he wasn't one of our main guys. And after he won the MVP of the World Series, I think in a 5-game series, he had 2 home runs and had 2 or 3 doubles, which is a record. And he said, "I've been in the big leagues for 13 years and I've never been hot." And I said, "Well, you picked the right week to get it going." I could recall after the last out was made, Cal Ripken caught that soft line drive off the bat of Gary Maddox. And I'm running up the tunnel, and I'm thinking, who's going to be the MVP? I'm thinking, should it be Scotty? No. I said, well, no, not him. He lost the first game. We won the next 4. And then I think, oh, Demper. I said, I couldn't have been happier. Rick Dempsey, I lived in California at the time, and Dempsey and I worked out in the wintertime. We used to run through the hills up near Calabasas where he lived and just run the mountains. And I'd get to him. I said, "We're not going to be doing this during the regular season. All we got to do is go first to third. And if I hit it right, I'm going to be able to trot." So he was great, in great shape. And then I could see why those catchers take a beating, and he was going to be ready for the regular season.
Kenny, I'm wondering, as an athlete who reached the level that you did and performed at, record books, you're in the history books. I didn't reach that level, but high school, I still have dreams where I show up to an away game with my home unis, and that'll be like that's one of my nightmares. And then I'll have the good dreams when I hit a game-winning shot. What dreams do you have from your playing career? And then who do you call when you wake up, or what do you do when you wake up? Either good dreams or the night.
That was so long ago; they're getting kind of hazy. but I can recall at one time I had 10 consecutive hits, and that's still the Orioles record. It was like I was pitching a no-hitter because nobody would speak to me. This was over a 3-day period. I went 4 for 4, 4 for 4, and then I got 2 hits in a row the next game. And speaking of Rick Dempsey, I finally made it out. I hit a rocket, probably the hardest ball I hit, and somebody caught it. And that was the end of the streak. And Rick Dempsey came down to me and says, "Well, I'm glad you finally made it out. We thought we wouldn't be able to talk to you for the rest of the season." And that was in April. That April, I hit 472, and I was player of the month in the American League. And going into the last day, I needed to go 2 for 3, I think, or 2 for 4, and I would have hit 500 in April. Well, anyway, I hit a home run my first time up. I didn't know that. I didn't know that came into play until after the game. The writers came up to me and said, "If you'd gotten another hit, you would have hit 500 this month." And I said, "Well, why don't you guys tell me that before the game? The way I'm going, I could have done it."
There's nothing like having that kind of especially in this game in baseball, to have that kind of confidence to say, "Dude, I got this. I'm good."
You're going to fail 7 out of 10 times and you're still going to the Hall of Fame, so you've got to be able to deal with it. I have a grandson who's a pretty good player, and I went to see him play one day, and I don't think he got any hits that day, right? So we're riding back in the car. He says, "Papa Ken, I didn't hit very well today." I said, "Jax," his name's Jackson. I said, "Jax, Hank Aaron wasn't great every day either. So I said, just take it
Yeah,
easy here.
no
And he went
lie.
out the next day and got 3 hits. So,
There you go. There you go. Hey, I'm going to go back to switch
okay.
hitting for a second, because it just really dawned on me when you think of all, with Mantle at the top and Eddie, and you're number 20. But did you and Chili Davis, man? So many
Yeah.
really good players, man. Berkman,
Jones, Chipper.
uh, yeah,
Yeah.
Chipper Jones. Did you? Was there anybody you could pattern yourself after? Or I was just wondering. Once you got up the higher levels of baseball.
Well, of course, growing up, everybody wouldn't be like Mickey Mantle, that everybody couldn't switch hit. So, did I pattern myself? I think that the best thing is to know yourself, Dave, as a hitter and
There you
what
go.
works for
Yeah.
you. I was always a good high on base guy. And that's why Earl Weaver, my first year in Baltimore, he told me I was going to lead off. And I said, Earl, I don't steal bases. I'm not that type of player. He says, that's not what I'm talking about. He says, you walk a lot, you get on base. Earl's favorite play was a 3-run homer.
Yes,
My
indeed.
first time up in the American League, we opened the season in Detroit, 1975, and Joe Coleman's pitching for the Tigers. I walk on 4 pitches. I'm the first guy up in the season. Tommy Davis gets a base hit. I go to third base. And Lee Mays, first time up in the American League, hits the 3-run homer in the upper deck in left field. So I scored the first run of the season, come back to the dugout, and Earl Weaver puts his finger in my chest and says, "That's what the hell I'm talking about. Just get on base." That. And I think I got on base over 40% of the time that year. And I've had better years than that. And one year I led the American League in on base, National League in on base percentage, and I set the Oriole record for on base percentage a few years later, and that's still the record. I think I got on base
Nice.
44% of the time that year. So, and I
Wow.
think I had a 48 game streak where I got on base 48 games in a row. It's not that hard. For me, hitting was, if it's too hard to actually swing and hit it, it's probably a ball. So that's the way I looked at it. And after a while, the umpires realize you have a pretty good eye, and you get the close ones. Rick Dempsey said,
Good for
"Yeah."
you.
Dempsey said, "I think that pitch is called a strike." I said, "That's because I don't swing at everything like you do. Just get up there and
Yeah.
take your time. Don't be afraid to run the count to 3-2, because you get the 3-2, you got him where you want him. He's got to throw a strike, or else I'm on base, and Eddie Murray's coming up next. So that's what Earl wants. He wants Eddie Murray up there with men on base. That was my job.
Yeah.
You know?
That sounds like a theme that I've heard over the years. If Mr. Mays thought it was a strike, you'd have swung at it. And I'm sure you can fill, yeah, right. You can fill in the blank with all the great hitters, right? And
Yeah, or I've heard another one where that we were complaining Hank Aaron was getting towards the end of his career, and he's going for the record, and he's taking these close pitches, and they're not calling him. So after a while, our pitchers are complaining. And I'd tell them, look, nobody came here to see Hank Aaron strike out.
What was your strategy? Boxing they call the sweet science. I love your confidence. You said it wasn't really hard for me. When you got up to the plate, your plate approach, was it you're cutting off a third of the plate? Give us a sense in terms of what a young kid today might be able to take from your career and implement.
Okay, first of all, you got to know the opposing pitcher. Number two, when you get to big leagues, you get to face these guys over and over again. So you get to know them pretty well. It's almost like you don't need scouting reports, and then you got to know your umpires too. You got to know the ones that have the bigger strike zones, and the ones that are going to, maybe give you the close ones. Number three, my whole thing was to get ahead on the count. Then you got the pitcher where you want it. It's 2-0 or 2-1 or 3-1. When they get ahead, they try and get you to chase pitches. When it's 0-2 or 1-2, they're trying to get you to swing at bad ones. Well, I wouldn't do that. And all of a sudden, before you know it, the count's 3-2. And that's where I wanted to be. So the whole idea is, for me, number one, get a good pitch to hit. If somebody throws it right down the middle, I'm going for it. I'm not taking that, because you might not get another one like that. But, when you get to during the course of that bat, you might have to change your approach. When you're behind on the count, don't be afraid to hit the ball the other way or get jammed. You're strong enough, you can hit it over the infielders. But when the ball is right where you want it, Don't foul it off. You got to hit it hard. When you're going bad, you foul that pitch off, and you just say, "Oh no, I'm not getting enough."
In the time since you played to now, it's sort of performance, mental skills, sort of a lot of things have come onto the scene that have made an impact. Did you have any sort of breathing techniques, or how would you calm your nerves, or was that not something you dealt with? If you could walk us through your plate approach in that sense, that'd be awesome.
My first approach was I love playing the game. So when I got there, I was ready to go. Um, I didn't like rain delays. I didn't like rainouts. I mean, if we're at the ballpark, we're here to play. Let's. And fortunately for me, 12 of my 15 year career, we were on good teams. We were on winning teams. So it meant something just about every single day to go out there. The 3 years I was in Montreal, um, we didn't win. It was more of like an expansion team, and they had a lot of guys that were over the hill and a lot of guys who were younger, like me. You didn't have the guys in the middle that kind of carried the team. The guys with the experience, but not over the hill yet. So those years were like formative for me, and that's when the Orioles got me on their radar, and they were willing to make a trade for me. Um, it worked out really well for me to go to Baltimore. I still live in the area here, except in the winter when it's cold like now. I'm headed south, but just I really found out what team baseball was like when I got there. I'll give you a good story. We're in spring training that year, my first year with the Orioles. First person I see when I walk in the clubhouse is Brooks Robinson. He puts his arm around me and he says, "Ken, welcome to the Orioles. We have a good team here. You don't have to do it all by yourself." I walk in the clubhouse, and there's guys like Paul Blair and Tommy Davis and Mike Cuellar and Jim Palmer and Mark Belanger, Bobby Grich, Lee May, Grant Jackson. And I'm looking at all these guys. I said, Brooks is right. We got some good players here.
Yeah, doing right, man.
Well, to go a little further with that, Mark Belanger and his wife Dee threw a party for the whole team where we were staying in spring training, and he invited everybody. We didn't have any kids at the time, so it wasn't the kids yet, but my mom was down there for spring training. So I asked Mark, "Can I bring my mom?" He said, "Sure, bring your mom. We'd love to meet her." So my mom comes in and she strikes up a conversation with Brooks Robinson, and they must have talked for a half hour or so. So then on the way back to where we were staying in the car, my mom says, "This is a pretty tight team. These not only are they good, they're pretty tight." And then she said, "You might want to stay here for a while." So, my mom was a good judge of character. And, 10 years with the Orioles before I finally retired. And, I had a chance to be a free agent twice. And I just didn't want to go anywhere else. And, I was playing on a good team with great guys,
Yeah, man.
future Hall of Famers like Eddie Murray and Palmer. Not only were they in the Hall of Fame manager and Weaver, not only were the guys I had played with Hall of Famers, but the rest of the guys are pretty darn good too. So Bunbury, guys like that. And speaking of Bunbury, he'll probably be playing golf with us, Dave. So be ready.
All right, look forward to it.
Good.
I love hearing these names. And a few minutes ago, you mentioned Tommy Davis. I met Tommy Davis once, and I knew his career. Batting champion with the Dodgers. What a sweetheart of a guy! What a terrific man! I mean, he should not be forgotten.
Oh,
A forgotten guy in your generation.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, he was older
good
at the time. He was getting ready. He only had a couple years left. But you're right with the Dodgers.
Right.
That's before I got to the big leagues. He had won the batting title, and he was. Well, Dodgers had some good. Koufax and Drysdales and guys like that, pitchers, and Willie Davis, and they had some. They were. Yeah, they had some good teams. Tommy Davis. He was a very smart hitter. In fact, I batted in front of him. I led off that year, and he told me that, "Look, if you see me stand at the plate and I got the knob, I'm holding the bat by the knob and have it straight up and down, that means the next pitch I want the hit and run on it. You go. Doesn't matter what Earl says, you go." And my first time up, I walked, and I looked in Detroit that day, and he had his hand on the bat like that. I went. Sure enough, he got a base hit. I ended up first and third, and then Lee May followed with the home run. So he could swing the
Hey,
bat. He knew what he was
yeah,
doing up there.
man. Yeah, Tommy was a teammate of the great Lenny Wilkens, boys high school in
Oh,
Brooklyn.
that's right, Brooklyn. Yeah, every once in a while Brooklyn would come out in
Yeah,
him though.
yeah. Hey, I want to, folks. I want another thing about Kenny. Won the '82 Roberto Clemente Award. He's in the Baltimore Orioles Hall of Fame, and those are the two terrific honors there,
Yeah,
Kenny.
I think the highest honor a player can get, the off-field honor, is the Roberto Clemente Award, because it's not only what you do on the field, but it's what you do off the field, and how you know react in your community. I had great fans here in Baltimore. I played here 10 years. I can't ever remember being booed by the home crowd. Now, it helped that we had winning seasons every year. Yeah,
A
that
lot.
helped. But that's why I still stay active in the community. I'm on the board of the Cool Kids campaign. And what we do is we help kids and their families who are dealing with cancer. And I have my own golf tournament every June, and all my guys come out and play. People come from all over the country and play, and we raise a lot of money to. The money goes to directly to the families and the kids who are dealing with cancer. We have things like Christmas parties, Halloween parties. We have gift baskets for the kids in the hospitals. We have tutoring for the kids. Um, because kids who are suffering from cancer, they have to go to their treatments and they miss school. So we have tutoring for the kids. We have retired teachers that come in and teach them and help them. And we have student teachers that come over from Towson University who will help the kids and tutor them at our clubhouse. We have a clubhouse in Towson, Maryland, where we have all the parties for the kids and everything. We have our big meetings. So it's a nonprofit, and I've been on the board now for about 16 years, and my tournament's gone for about
Nice.
16 years. So
Wow.
it's very close to my
Yeah.
heart to, when you see people, everybody's been touched with cancer, but when you see kids dealing with it, it's a little, it really tears at your heart. And some of these kids don't make it. I mean, the odds are getting better, but some of them don't make it. And, you get close to them, and you hear the parents say, well, they might not be around much longer. That really hurts. So we're trying our best
Oof.
to make them happy while they're here.
Bless your heart.
That's phenomenal that you're involved in the way you are in that charity. And I'd be interested. What have you learned from the kids, obviously, and what's been the emotional
Oh,
impact?
yeah, that's a great question, because the kids, they're kids. They just want to be happy. They want the love of their parents. They want to do things that kids do. Uh, Recently, we had the Christmas party. We had Santa there, and see the kids sitting there, some of them suffering, and they just what, and we give them gifts and everything, and everybody leaves with something, and they just want to be kids. And your health is everything. My parents died from cancer, but they live long lives. They got into their 80s. So when you see kids are dealing with it when they're, even infants at times, that really hurts. So that's why I got involved, and that's why I remain involved.
Good for you. That's beautiful. Good for you.
June of you had a 15-year career. What was your debut?
1970. It was late June. I was playing at AAA Tidewater, and I was having a great year. I was leading the league in everything: home runs, RBIs, batting average. My on base percentage, Dave, believe it or not, was 513, and we're talking
Mm.
June, so we were like halfway through the season, and we had a game in Columbus, Ohio. You remember Chuck Hiller? Yeah, he was
Oh
our
yeah,
manager.
second
He
baseman.
was our
Yeah,
manager,
yeah.
and we lost the game to the Columbus team 2-1. The only run we scored, I hit a homer, and we made some mistakes during the game. He's kind of chewing us out after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he points at me and says, you're going to Chicago tomorrow. And I think, Chicago? Oh, and I thought, the Mets are in Chicago. I got called up to the big leagues. So in those days, no cell phones or anything. I rushed back to the hotel to call my parents and tell them I was going to the big leagues. And they already knew because they were in New York. So it was no surprise. So I got on the plane. I flew from Columbus, Ohio, one stop in Dayton, and then to Chicago. I get to the team hotel. I'm dressed like in those days, players wore suits and they were dressed to the nines. So I had minor league clothes on. I walk into the hotel, and there's the GM of the Mets, Bob Sheffing, and he hands me like $600 right out of his pocket. He said, "Go down to Marshall Fields and get yourself a jacket and some pants, and a nice shirt and a tie." So I ran down the street, dressed up, got on the bus, went out to Wrigley Field, playing a doubleheader against the Cubs that day. I didn't play the first game, but I played the second game. And my first game, Gil Hodges batted me third. I batted
Wow.
third. I couldn't believe it. I figured, I'm going to bat seventh, eighth or something. No, I batted third, took my first big league 0 for 4. Nolan Ryan pitched that game, and he won it. And then I went 0 for 4 the next day. I think I got to face Fergie, and that wasn't fun. So I went 0 for 4. So I'm 0 for my first 11. I think I'm going back. They're going to send me back. So we're in Montreal. I get a base hit off Steve Renko. Next time up, I hit a home run off of Bill Stoneman. So now I got 2 hits in the big leagues. Next day I got 3 hits, and I'm on my way. So after Montreal, we come back to New York, and one of the greatest thrills of my career. Now this is, I've been in the big leagues maybe 1 week. My dad, my uncle, and my brother were at LaGuardia Airport to meet me and bring me home to my house, and my mom was there, and she's crying. Oh, my son's in the big leagues. He's already hit 1 home run. So they were all happy. And a few weeks later, Mount Vernon, New York, throws a parade in my honor, and the Mount Vernon Met. That's what they called me. So anyway, I began to think about it. I said, maybe they threw this parade right away, thinking I might not be here long. But I lasted 14 more years, so it was cool.
Yeah. And you were traded for Rusty Staub
Yeah.
eventually, right?
Yeah.
Legrand Rome.
Yeah, I can remember that was the day that Gil Hodges. I went to the funeral, and I found out at the funeral that I'd been traded to Montreal. It was myself, Tim Foley, and Mike Jorgensen for Rusty Staub. I think Rusty was having contract issues with the Expos. I mean, he was their big star, and the Expos were looking to, maybe not pay him, but also wanted to get young players in their system, or at least the big league ready players. So all 3 of the fans in Montreal were not happy with this trade because Rusty was everything for them. But what they soon figured out was that whenever the Expos won a game, now we weren't a great team. Whenever we won a game, one of the 3 of us had something to do with winning the game. So, and my second year there, I had my first big season. I drove in 100, scored 100, led the league in on-base percentage, hit over 300, and I can remember Tom Seaver coming up to me, and he's pitching for the Mets. And he comes up to me and says, "Kid, you had a great year. I kind of wish he was still here."
Yeah, amen.
I just said, well, it worked out for me. And then, like I said, the big trade for me was going to Baltimore. And there's a story behind that trade, too. Mike Torres, the pitcher, who's my good buddy, I play golf with him in Florida. We went out the night before, and while we were out, we found out that the Orioles had traded for Lee May. And we said, oh, man, the Orioles are a really good team. Man, they're going to be really good. So we go out. We're out to about 2 o'clock in the morning. My phone rings about 6 o'clock in the morning. It's Mike. I said, Mike, what do you call me for, man? It's 6 o'clock in the morning. He says, Ken, I just got traded. I said, oh, Mike, man, I'm really going to miss you. Where are you going? He says, I'm going to Baltimore. I said, oh, man, we were talking about the Orioles last night. I'm really happy for you. He said, no, you don't understand. You're going with me. And I said, what? My phone hasn't rung yet. Nobody's called me. He said, your phone's going to ring in about 10 minutes. Sure enough, Jim Fanning, the GM of the Expo, called me. He said, you've been traded to Baltimore. I had a smile on my face about that big. I said, oh, I'm going to a good team, closer to New York. My parents be able to see me a little easier. So that's how I found out that I had been traded. Now, the first year we were in Baltimore, Mike Torres won 20 games for Baltimore.
He did. Good pitch.
And I hit 300. And Earl Weaver, our manager, he says, how many trades you make? You get a 20-game winner and a 300 hitter in the same deal. And I said, yeah, well, it's worked out for them. Well, they traded Mike over the winter after they to get Reggie from Oakland.
Right.
Yeah, and that trade came down in spring training. Uh, I'm playing the outfield in a spring training game, and Don Baylor's playing left field. And they took Baylor out of the game, and I said, "What? There's nothing wrong with him. Why'd they take him out?" So I go up to the clubhouse. He's sitting over in the corner. Remember, he's a lifelong Oriole. Sitting over in the corner
Mm-hmm.
crying. I thought, something happened to one of his relatives or something. His nickname was Groove. I said, "Groove, what happened?" He says, "I got traded." He says, "I said, where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to Oakland." I said, "Oh man, I'm going to miss you. Who do we get?" He said, "Got Reggie." All of a sudden, it dawned on me, hey, Reggie and I play the same position.
Oh, jeez.
And I said, "Oh man, well Reggie didn't show up in spring training. He was holding out, and he didn't show up till May. And by the time he got there, we were already 7 games behind. So, but he played well while he was there. I mean, Reggie's Reggie, um, and but we knew he was going to leave. That was like I think the first year of free agency. He left to
Yeah, that
sign
was
with the Yankees.
76,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can see where free
Wow.
agency is now. We're and what Reggie get? Maybe $3 million, maybe something
Something like
like
that.
that.
And yeah,
What are we talking
that
now?
time that was that's
Yeah.
cab fare for these guys now. I mean, good grief.
Well, since you brought that up, I want to ask you. You might have had a contract signing for a 15-year career, 282 average. You might have signed a $190 million contract if you were playing today. Is that ever something you think about?
I was the first Oriole ever to get a 5-year contract. And
Mm.
after Reggie left, it became evident through my agent that the Orioles wanted to keep me. They didn't want to lose both of us. So um, when it came time to negotiate, I told my agent, I said, "Tell him I want a 5-year deal." I thought that was really, really overshooting it. Well, anyway, he calls back the next day. He says, "Yeah." They said yes. I said, "Ooh, okay." I was looking for security. I had one. My oldest son had been born then, so I'm looking for some security. So I said 5 years. I just threw it out there, and they said yes. And then he said, "How much you think we should ask it for?" I said, "Well, tell me what this amount." He called back next day. He said, "They said yes." I said, "Man, we should ask for more." So anyway,
Yeah, right.
I got a 5 year. I'm not complaining about it. In fact, I'm kind of glad that because the owners thought free agency was going to ruin baseball back in the day. Well, now, I mean, it makes baseball even more popular. I mean, we're still talking about guys who should be signed in the dead of winter. And, for the
Yeah.
amounts of money that we're talking about now, the only issue I have with the modern players is that some of them don't know how it got to this point. They don't know the history and
Oh,
strikes and being locked out and things like that. They just think it was been like this the whole time, where you just go in and ask for the money. If they don't give it to you, somebody else will. So it wasn't like that back then. I remember going to spring training. We had to practice on the high school field because the owners wouldn't let us use the ballpark. So things like that. But it was worth it. Wasn't only about the salaries then; it was about pension plans and arbitration. And I'm thankful we did it. I still think I played in the best generation of players because we were the ones who said we're not going to play until this is right. And
hey.
we're all living proof of it now because we all got pretty good pensions. And the players now, their pensions are even better than ours. So
Yeah.
that's why I feel so fortunate to have played in that era, the 70s and the 80s. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I still get mail from people. I get mail every day, people asking for autographs, but a lot of them are old enough. They say, "We remember those days. We wish it was kind of like that." And I said, "Yeah, I wish I was playing now." But,
No question
man,
about it.
I tell you what, if me and
Oh,
Eddie Murray had
wow.
gone in there as a tandem, they would have had to give us half the team.
That's exactly right. No
So,
doubt about it. By the way, Reggie, that contract, you got five for 2.96 mil.
oh,
Pretty good
okay, almost 3 million.
valuation. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I was very, very much aware of you as a
Hmm.
player, but then when I found out, and I think you'd already been doing it a few years, you went into broadcasting, and I was thrilled because I was a sports writer at the
Yeah.
time, with eyes on getting into broadcasting, and hopefully maybe one day
Were you in Philly at the
doing
time, Dave?
baseball. And no, I was here in New
Okay.
York, and boy, when I found out you were broadcasting, you were only the second African American I was aware of
Wow.
who was broadcasting on a consistent basis. Bill White with the
Yes.
Yankees, and then you were with Montreal. You did TSN in
Yeah.
Canada, so you did some Toronto games. Then eventually, what full time you were in
Yeah,
Montreal,
that's
right?
true. I'll tell you how that started. Actually, it was Tony Kubek who came up to me in 1983. The Blue Jays were starting to be a pretty good team. And he said,
Right.
Ken, if the Blue Jays make the playoffs, would you be interested in coming up and working the playoff series in Toronto? And I said, sure, I'll do it. You know, I had some experience on TV in Baltimore in the off seasons. They would call me into
Mm-hmm.
the local TV studios and make my predictions for the World Series and the playoffs. And the first thing I would tell people, don't bet the house on this because it might not work out the way I wanted
Smart.
to. Yeah, I made that caveat right
Right.
away. So I didn't want people in Baltimore coming looking for me. So anyway, Tony asked me, but that particular year it didn't work out because we won the World Series that year and didn't work out. Well, the next year was my last year playing, and then Tony came up to me again and he said, "Look, they're starting a new network in Canada, TSN. It's going to be like ESPN, and the Blue Jays are going to be on it." He says, "I'm going to work those games, but there are 20 games that he couldn't do because of conflicts with NBC." So he says, "Would you like to do those 20 games?" I said, "Sure, I'll do them." So they took me to spring training in Dunedin, Florida, with the Blue Jays, and showed me the ropes and everything. About a week before the season started, uh, they came up to me again. The producer came in and said, "Look, Montreal Expos have just signed on to the network. People know you in Montreal. We would like you to do TV games. There's going to be 60 of them. Would you like to do them? You can still do the 20 Toronto games, but now you got 80 games." So I told my wife, I said, "Look, 80 games. She said, they're going to pay you more?" I said, "Sure." So I ended up doing 80 games my first year. And after 3 years of that kind of schedule, the Expos came to me and said, "We really like your work. We really like what you're doing." I was working with Dave Van Horn, and Hall of Famer. And they said, "We'd like you to do all our games." And I said, "Well, all the games aren't on TV in English." They said, "Well, the ones that aren't on TV, we want you to do radio." So that's where play-by-play started to come in. David worked 6 innings, and I'd worked 3, and that's when I started
Oh
getting into
man,
play-by-play. And
boy, it worked.
I had so
Oh,
much fun. Doing TV all these years, I kind of miss radio because you can put your feet up and do the game. And you're the eyes and the ears. You're not following the.
yeah,
As
yeah,
much as I love Yes Network and the TV and the people I work with, radio is like, man, this is really cool. I'm just sitting here talking about baseball, man. Just
yeah.
I think one
It,
thing that uh, when I retired, one thing that kind of I wouldn't say soured me on the game, but the game had changed where it wasn't so much storytelling like Vince Scully and Jack Buck and Harry Carey. These guys were very kind to me when I first started broadcasting, and they encouraged me unbelievably.
oh
All 3 of
man,
them.
good for you.
Um,
Yeah,
so, but now you're getting into exit velo and all this sort of thing, and every pitch is how hard they're throwing, and it doesn't leave much time for telling a nice story about the player or something that happens in the game that you can relate to that from years ago. And so that's I plus it was too much striking out. It wasn't really hitting. It's just a lot. I did some games, David, where the Yankees would strike out 15 times and still win the game because they hit 3 home runs. So and to me
hmm,
that wasn't really hitting. So
yeah,
John Filippelli, Flip. Yeah,
yeah.
one day I just said, "Flip, this is it. I want to go." He said, "Oh, you can't go. You can't. We don't have anybody to replace you." I said, "Yeah, Flip, this game it doesn't have the it's just different." I just said it's just different. I don't like sitting up there just calling strikeout after strikeout. He says, well, can you hang on for one more year? You know, just hang on for one. I said, if you flip, I'll do it. He says, you can do games wherever you want to do them. We'll pay you more. You can do fewer games. And I said, well, you know, I'll do the games in Baltimore for sure because I live here. I said, I'll do the games in Tampa Bay because I got a house down there when they go to play the Rays. And I said, I'll come up to New York for a series or two. You know, when Baltimore comes in, I'll go up there. So he says, yeah, it's done. It's a done deal. Yeah. So that lasted for 2 more years. And then finally, you know, I went on the air with Michael one day and I said, Michael, this is it. And he said, well, you're going to come up here for something? I said, no. He said, you know me. Either I'm all in or I'm all out. And there are things that are getting to be more important to me now. So I'm going to be all out. I love all you guys. I'm going to miss you tremendously. You know, I'll keep in touch, there's no doubt. But, you know, I don't go to many ball games. I think I only went to like 2 last year. And one was to take my grandson. And the other was because the Yankees were here in Baltimore. And I went with my wife and my brother-in-law and his wife. And those are the only 2 games I went to. Now I watch them on TV. But once I think the game is decided, no, I'm going to do something else. You know, I can read a book or something.
I think the day that, and I think I even texted you or called you after the game because I happened to be watching when you said on air, and I said, "Oh, he's really done now." I remember that. I said, "This way, you put it in position where, hey man, I just went on in front of millions and retired. There's no way in the world you can bring me back." And I remember calling you on that. I think because we were in Seattle and I was watching you guys run early before us, and I was so tickled, but I was happy for you. But I was like, golly, that is.
It got to the point where I didn't have to do it anymore. You know, all the kids are, you know, grown up. They got their own thing. The houses are paid for. You know, this now, you know, this, my wife and I have our time. You know, I go out and play golf with my guys all the time. When I get to Florida, I'm going to be out there 3 or 4 times a week. And, you know, you'll get there one day.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Yeah, you'll get there one day.
And let me go back to what you were talking about, the differences of the game and the reliance on numbers. I know because, you know, during my time, you know, I started in 07 with the Mariners. And boy, I think probably about 10 or 11, it seemed like the numbers, you know, StatCast, and it's not like they call it 18th level stats. And it's a part of the game, but it's good for the evaluator. But as you mentioned, particularly on radio, the storytelling, you can't let that go.
But you're right, exactly on radio, because every once in a while, you know, pictures will change in baseball. But if you got a good director, he'll stay with you. You know, I had John Moore over those years, and
good one.
Oh, he was fantastic. In fact, you know, I'd start to say something, and before I finish, he already had the shot up, and he'd say, "I've worked with you a long time. I knew where you were going." And I said, "You're getting scary."
It's a beautiful thing when that works.
Yeah, I said, "Oh, it was beautiful." I said, "Boy, this is getting scary, isn't it?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." He's a great director. He was fantastic.
But you know, it was a thing too. And Jared, I told Kenny this before that, you know, I aspiring to get into baseball and to see Kenny and as the saying goes, somebody that looks like me doing baseball. It's like, hey, I got a shot. At some point, this has a chance to happen.
We actually got to work together.
And again, 2010 was an experimental game. They were thinking about doing games in 3D. And Jared, I got to tell you, and Kenny and I have known each other since probably, I don't know, you were still with the Orioles when we met in 80. But it felt like I'd already worked with Ken for 10 years.
We had a good time.
And it was like, it was such a perfect mesh.
We didn't step on each other.
I was like, damn, we can do this one day full time for a couple of years.
You know, Dave, aside though, you know, 3D didn't really take off. I think we killed it.
No. That's the way of looking at it. Yeah. So the game changed. A lot of guys in your generation, that your peers feel the same way about the game. I still love the game. Don't get me wrong, but it had the same feeling.
Yeah,
right?
You know, I play golf a lot with Ross Grinsley and Tippy Martinez, Mike Torres, the guys, Doug DeSensei, Palmer's come back. We had Joe West at one of my golf tournaments.
Nope.
Yeah,
Cowboy.
we had a lot of former baseball people come in. And, you know, guys our age, we're not complaining about the game because we love it. We don't complain about the players making salaries, but we will point out, look at what these guys are. And we're saying, Yeah, I'd say to Tippy, Tippy, you'd been a $20 million reliever right now, maybe probably more,
Yeah.
because he could wheel.
Left-hander, yeah,
But
absolutely.
the game itself it's still three strikes and you're out. I mean, it's still scoring more runs. I was kind of disheartened the other day when Ricky passed away, Ricky Anderson. I mean, yeah, I texted my middle son, who's a baseball coach in Haddonfield, New Jersey. He's a high school baseball coach. And I said,
Nice.
the game is about scoring runs, and Ricky did that better than anybody. And when I said, when Ricky got on first, I knew we couldn't stop him. Yeah, and I said, I'm out in right field. I got the best vantage point of watching him steal second base than anybody in the world. And I'm just watching those powerful strides and just how fast he's a full speed. Like at the second step, he was
Oh,
gone. And I heard some great Ricky stories over the years that Ricky got on first one day and he looked over across the diamond at the third baseman and held up two fingers. And the third baseman looked over like, what are you talking about? And two pitches later, he was on third. Jared, Ricky was awesome. Our pitchers hated him. Someone wanted to drill him, and I said, no, you can't do that because he's going to be in first base, and that's where we don't want him. He was that type of. I had the opportunity to play against and with some awesome baseball players, and it's a little different than it was now because now that they get all this video every day, video information. In our day, it was more word of mouth, and you had to learn on your own when you got up there. I mean, you could see that I didn't need a radar gun to tell me Nolan Ryan was throwing harder than anybody else. I didn't need that. So now you see it's 102, 103, and I just say, well, Nolan threw like that every pitch. He threw harder in the seventh, eighth, and than he did in the first. And he was just a freak of nature. He was, I would say, the most uncomfortable at bat that ever, just from a comfort level, because you knew he had your life in his hands. So,
yeah. Did he drill you at any time?
Because I've been a teammate of his with the Mets.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and
okay.
he came close a couple times, but I don't think there was anything malicious involved here. I'll tell you a quick Nolan story. After I was broadcasting Expos games, Nolan was still pitching, and we're in Houston one day, and he's pitched. He pitched a great game, and I went to the clubhouse after the game to congratulate him. And on my way to the clubhouse, I ran into his wife Ruth, and she looked exactly the same as she had like 20 years before. So I went to the clubhouse. I said, Noli, I said, you and I are getting old. I just saw Ruth. She looks exactly the same as she did 20 years ago. And Nolan in that Texas drawl said she hadn't had to tote that ball out there every 4 days like me.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, there's only who don't
Yeah,
practice. Yeah. He's yeah. He's be like, hey Dave, how you doing? Good to see you again.
Yeah, man.
Wow. And let me just just step back again for
Okay.
broadcasting wise. Favorite calls you had or moments that you were able to call with the Yankees during you had a great run.
Yeah.
What did you do? 24, 25 years.
25 years, every single year was a winning season. And they still,
oh man, Cat, don't rub it in. Come on.
Still got that streak going. I think they're up to 30 now. It might be 30.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
So,
no
I was fortunate enough to call 2 perfect games.
There you go.
I got to call Dennis Martinez's against the Dodgers in LA, and that was Dodgers had a stacked lineup that day. They had Strawberry, they had Eddie Murray, they had a bunch of guys on that team that could break up anybody's no hitter. But Dennis pitched a perfect game, and Dave Van Horn had a great call at the end of that game. El Presidente, El Perfecto, and that was a great call. And also I got a chance to do David Wells' perfect game against the Twins at Yankee Stadium. Now in the 7th inning, Paul Molitor came up, and I said this on the air. I said, if he gets past Molitor, I think the rest of the guys are going to fall in place. And sure enough, he got Molitor out. I think he grounded out, and the rest of them fell in place. And Boomer had his perfect game. The next year, David Cohn pitched one, but I wasn't working that day. I was taking the train from Baltimore to New York. I was going to work the next series, And if I remember correctly, it was a Sunday afternoon against Montreal. So I get off the train at Penn Station in New York, and somebody walks up and says, "Hey, Ken, how you doing? Oh, you're going to be working the next series." He says, "Oh, by the way, David Cohn pitched a perfect game today." I said, "Oh, yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, right." I get to the hotel, I turn on the TV, and he had pitched a perfect game. And I said, "Man, I missed that one." It was Bobby Mercer and Tim McCarver who worked that game.
Yeah. I got a philosophical question regarding no-nos and perfectos. You as a former player, I'm not a former big league player. I've been, groomed as a reporter, yada yada yada. And I had Felix's perfect game. Philip Umber. Who was it? John Means threw one against the Mariners.
I saw that one.
No hitter. Here was Iwakuma threw a no against the Orioles. I say it, fifth inning, sixth inning. Ozzie Smith was all over me one day. You can't say that. That's a perfect game. I said, "Hey, my man, love you, Oz, but I'm reporting. I don't believe in those jinxes anyway." Did you, at one point during the course of those perfectos, did you say no hitter and or perfect game?
I believe I did, because I didn't believe that stuff either. I mean,
Yes.
you get to the point. What if people had just turned the game on in the fifth inning? You gotta let them. You gotta let them know where you are, right?
Kenny, word for word, I've heard my dad say that same exact thing. What if somebody turned the game on in the fifth inning and they don't know? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. We got a perfect game going. You might not want to go anywhere, so that sort of thing, So,
hey, so one year we're in Chicago to play the White Sox, and it's a Friday. McCarver's in for the Saturday game. And I'd met Tim over the years a bunch of times, really liked him. And he comes over and, hey, Tim, hey, man, how are you? He says, "Hey, man, what's this you talking about? Guy throwing a no-hitter." I looked at him like, "Are we going there?" He says, "I'll just mess with you, man." He said, "I'm glad you did it." He said one time, he said years ago, not that long ago, the same thing you just said. He came home from a game, turned on the TV, and was unpacking his bag and doing whatever, just had the game on the background. Then in the eighth inning, he looks at the score. He comes back during a break and he sees there's a no-hitter, and he wanted to hang the announcer because the dude never said it was a no-hitter. I would have sat my butt down and watched the game. Hello. But I never, what's this about you told him that? No, I'm thinking, why, we're going to get angry here? Come on, man.
You got to let people know where you are. Also too, we used to do the game straight up and down New York. But if your team played poorly if Yankees played poorly that day, you got to let people know. They can see it. I mean, they're not playing well, But you also, it's the Yankees, because you might say, well, they'll be back tomorrow. This is only the first game of the series. And I remember Joe Torre saying years ago, the most important game in a 3-game series is the second game. Because if you lose the first one, you win that second one, you're even, you still got a chance to win the series. If you win the first one, win the second one, you've already won the series. And if you won the first two, you got a chance to sweep. So he said the second game of a 3-game series is the most important game.
Great call.
So, and I didn't think of it that way. And then I said, yeah, he's right. It is.
Oh, it's 100% right. Yeah.
Well, Ken, I wanted to know, you said you only attended 2 games last year, attending fewer games. You will be listening to the radio, not the TV, I'm assuming, right? On the 27th of March when the Yankees face off against the Brewers.
I'll probably be on my way to a golf course or coming back or something. But, with Sirius radio nowadays, I mean, you can listen to anybody. And I'm looking forward to driving around here because, people, this is funny because I live here in Maryland. I play for the Orioles. I never played for the Yankees, but I worked for them for 25 years, right? So people ask me, which way do you lean? I mean, they are division rivals, right? And I'll be honest with you. I said, look, I know a lot of people with the Yankees now that are still there when I was there. But there might be less than a handful of people with the Orioles there when I was playing. So I'd say 60-40. I'm leaning towards the Yankees. And people around here would say, how can you do that? I said, it's easy. They paid off these houses and stuff. So my kids in college, that's how it works. So when I get a chance, when I listen to a ball game on the radio, and if the two teams are playing, playing different teams, I'm going to listen to Dave. There's no doubt in my mind. He and Susan are going to be a great team.
That.
They're going to make it fun. And to me, that's what it's all. Baseball's a fun game. You got to let people know if your team stinks that day, but still, they're not going to stink much. I think they made some moves. Once they didn't get Soto, they went out and did something. They went out and got 4 guys, and they might be finished.
What's the signing you like best?
Ooh, well, I kind of like Fried because he's a pitcher. Everybody can use pitching. I like Devin Williams. Oh man, this guy. Clay Holmes got to be iffy last year, and they moved Luke Weaver in. He was pretty good, but I think Luke Weaver's better in the 8th, 7th, 8th inning. And Devin Williams is one of the best closers in baseball. I mean, that pitch he throws, what they call the airbender. That thing looks like a wiffle ball on steroids, man. It's just darting all over the place. They're going to have fun watching him this year. Bellinger should help because he can play anywhere. I still think they might make another move. I still think they would.
Second or third, right? Because you got Jazz as a swing guy.
Jazz can play. Jazz can play. That's his position, second, his original position. But he did a good job at third base for them last year. He brought a lot to the team. I mean, he brought some speed. Very rarely gets caught stealing. He can score from first on anybody's double, and certainly from second on anybody's single. So that's the sort of thing the Yankees need. Judge and Stanton are the thumpers. I mean, they're Dave. You're gonna watch these guys all year. There's no 2 guys hit the ball harder than these people.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, that ball that Big G hit against Cleveland. Come on,
120. The ball is like a little pea going out of the ballpark.
Yeah, a good a good 3-wood for somebody. A couple of names for you. Jason Dominguez, Spencer Jones. Thoughts on them? I mean, Dominguez outfielder, definitely known more for his bat, and Spencer Jones, a tall kid, and boy, he's continuing to fill out. He's a great looking athlete. I saw him in the Futures game. I did that a couple of years ago.
Other teams ask the Yankees in deals, they ask either one of those guys, and the Yankees they haven't given him up yet. Spencer Jones could be a left-handed hitting Judge. That's what I think. He's a big guy. He's got awesome power. Dominguez is a switch hitter. He came up last year, and the games that I did see him play, he made some mistakes in the outfield. He missed some balls.
He had one against us in Seattle. Yeah. He had one in Seattle where he told us, wow.
Yeah, he should have caught that. And I hope he worked on his defense this winter because he's got a chance to make the team as a hitter for sure. And you don't want to have the manager trotting somebody out there in the 7th inning, replacing you defensively because it's kind of embarrassing when you're only 22 years old, No
kidding. Volpe and Wells, your thoughts on that?
Volpe, he improved a lot. From what I saw last year. I mean, the year before, his rookie year hit 220, but he won the Gold Glove. And this year, I think he got up maybe 250, maybe that high. So he's on the upside as far as hitting's concerned. He changed his style. He cut down his swing a little bit, was more willing to go to right field. He can steal a base. Good fielder. He won the Gold Glove his first year. I can't recall who won it last year, but his first year, his rookie year, he won the Gold Glove. So he can play shortstop, that's for sure.
Austin Wells.
Power hitting catcher. He slumped off a little bit towards the end. Maybe, for these young guys, they don't realize they come up, the big league season's a lot longer. You've got 20-something more games. And, plus the people start to figure you out a little bit. And so you got to make the adjustments,
Kenny, and this has been a lot of fun.
It's more fun for me, believe me.
Awesome. Well, we're enjoying the heck out of it. You talk to NBA players and guys will say they could still do it or they're better than the guys today. And here's why, or so-and-so LeBron could never play in the night. Well, if you had one at-bat right now, by the way, you don't look a day over 48. So you and my dad, you guys have the same skincare routine, no natural.
That makes me feel good because I'm way over that.
one at-bat today, are you of the mind, hey, I can get a hit?
No, the age I am now, I can't. But if I was back in my heyday,
in your prime,
sure I could get a hit. There's no doubt in my mind. You go up there thinking you can hit anybody. Yeah.
I heard an NBA player, former NBA player, and is approaching 60, who was saying he can go get buckets today. So,
well, my cousin's Doc Rivers, and he's coaching the Bucks, right? And back in the day, he made the All-Star team, I think, a couple of times, at least once for sure.
Yeah, he did.
And he got to play with guys like Dominique and Tree Rollins and guys like that in Atlanta. And watching him now on the sidelines, I know he couldn't. He's not making it. Not against these guys. He's already had one hip surgery. And he's walking. He's still got a little limp there. Nah, it's not. No, and I know if I went up there right now, I probably couldn't even see him.
Oh,
I play golf with,
oh.
and I text them after every game. They win, get on a little streak. What did I text them the other day? They won a road game, and I text them, winning a game on the road in any sport is like finding gold in the opposition city. And he texted back, that's well said. And but we
Right.
come from a big family. His mom and my mom were sisters, and they had 3 other sisters and a brother. So I had like 26, 27 cousins. They were all from Chicago, but I grew up in New York. My mom was the only one to move away. And so we text each other. There's a thread after every game. All the cousins we spread out all over now. Atlanta, Chicago, New York. My brother's in New York. Some people in LA. And we nowadays you can watch any game. So we'll watch the game. I'll put it up. I got the NBA package, and I'll watch his game. If they win, we all get in, say, "Way to go, coach!" And he'll text back, "I love my family." Because we're always behind him. And he's a fantastic guy. I wish him all the best.
Who plays Ken Singleton in the Ken Singleton movie?
Oh, I got one. How about Denzel?
When in doubt, go with Denzel.
You know what? Because Denzel's from Mount Vernon, New York, like I am. And my mom used to tell people Denzel's the second most handsome guy from Mount Vernon, New York. A mother's love.
Hey, a couple things before. Hey, only a mom. A couple things before we wrap up. And I'm sure you do this, but mentorship young, aspiring Black announcers who want to get into play-by-play. What kind of involvement have you had in that?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the former reporters here in Baltimore, they used to cover us for the Baltimore Sun, is now started a program in DC, the DC area, and they're mentoring young African American kids to get them into broadcasting, or into writing, because he was a writer. So either way, and I did a podcast with him not too long ago, and to reach out. So you're still around, Dave. You got Robert Ford in Houston, who does a very good job. He's very good.
Yes, he does. Radio.
I think most of the Black players you see now, like Jim Rice, they're on the pregame shows. They're not necessarily on the games. I'd like to see them more on games. But Jim does a good. Speaking of hitting the golf ball, boy, you should see him hit it.
That's what I heard.
Whoa. Well, anyway, I played in a tournament with him, Flash Gordon's tournament in Sebring, Florida. And I was watching him at the range, and I'm saying, I'm going to be behind him all day.
Right.
Well, anyway, my group won the tournament, so I'm happy about that. But anyway,
there you go.
I would like to see more, and that's how you give back. I mean, we got to get more involved. I think not only in the broadcast, I'd like to see more Black players involved too. I mean, back in my day, we were 20% of the league. That's 5 guys a team. Well, now what is it? 6 or 8%?
Hey, Ken, I think over the last few years, we were like 6%. Like 70 guys, and I swear, I think I knew either knew or at least met everybody in the major, especially now with team interleague play and everything.
That's got to change.
Yeah,
I think they're trying. I don't know if it's they're talking a good game, but they're trying, and you're starting to see a few more young Black players come in the league. And not only when they get there, they seem like they're ready to stay too. That's the key. If you're going to play, you don't want to be there for 2 years. You want 10, 15. You want your pension. You want 10 years in. And that's what I want to see, guys that I can recognize year by year, and go. If I'm going to watch a team, I got to know who's on that team. And nowadays, in this day and age, like I said, you can watch any game, anytime, anywhere. You can listen to it on the radio. Same thing.
Recently, I'd say in the last 5-6 years, and I heard, this is not an exact stat, but in the draft, there's been
Yeah,
a higher percentage and higher number of African American players taken in the first round in the
exactly.
last
I heard that
easy
too.
last 10 years.
Yeah, I heard that too, and I was encouraged by that because Dave, when you're drafted number one, they got to make a certain amount of investment in you. And if they
Hey
got that
man,
investment in you, you're not going anywhere for a while. They're going to make sure that you can't play, before they let you go.
but you were first round pick, third overall. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, just in front of Carlton.
then clearly you can
Yeah,
play.
yeah. So yeah, well, coming up through the
Uh,
Mets organization, the Mets were in those days they were strong on pitchers. Uh,
yeah,
they had guys like Seaver and Kuzman and Gary Gentry and Nolan Ryan, Jim Bibby,
great crew.
um, Tug McGraw, Danny Frisella. That was our instructional league pitching staff. So if we gave up a run, it was news, So and all these guys
Yeah,
eventually made it to the big leagues, and our hitters were
yeah.
myself, um, Amos Otis, who they traded and they shouldn't have traded. Um, um, yeah,
Remember that?
Foley, Mike Jorgensen. So there were more pitchers than hitters in the Mets
No
organization.
doubt.
You could hit, you were moving up pretty quick.
Yeah, it was very similar to the
Yeah,
Dodgers.
exactly.
Dodgers weren't
Exactly.
they weren't killing the baseball, but they had arms like crazy, unbelievable. Closing segment, few
Okay.
quick things. Favorite ballpark to play in?
You're gonna like this one. I love the Kingdom.
Yeah,
Oh,
atmospherics
my
are good
goodness.
for you.
Well, first of all, they were more or less an expansion team in those days, and their pitching staff wasn't very good. Uh,
Not what it is today.
oh, well, not like today. They got some pitchers now. But I hit 14 home runs in that place. And there was a writer that wrote a story about the Mariners' opposition team, and I was the number one opposing guy. Yeah, I was
Believe it.
number one. Because not only hit 14 there, I hit 10 more in Baltimore against them. So
Mm,
they,
mm.
yeah, I was public enemy number one in Seattle. So
My goodness, boy! I'm glad you were able to get in and out of T-Mobile Park without any hassle.
hey,
Holy
when they
Toledo!
imploded the Kingdom, a tear came to my eye.
Most underrated player you played with?
Oof, underrated player I played with. Well, the guys I played with were really good. Um,
Yeah,
I would say somebody who might have been overlooked, but not defensively, was Mark Melanger. He won 8 Gold Gloves. Um,
great
he,
defender.
he he could pick it. I never. He was the best I ever saw at shortstop. He had good hands, and his throw to first base always hit the first man right here. He was. I will say, I think the most underrated player I played against was Dwight Evans, the Red Sox.
Oh man, yeah.
He was the best right fielder in the league. Had a great throwing arm. Had great range. Maybe didn't hit for a high average, but he could hit home runs. And I think one reason why he was sort of underrated because he was surrounded by guys like Jim Rice and Fred Lynn, Carlton Fisk, and Carl Yastrzemski, all these type of players. And I think, and plus he batted down in the lineup. But he could play. I just people ask me that nowadays. Well, I wish I could play right field like him. He could really play it.
Best pitcher you faced?
Statistically, it was Tom Seaver. I think I was 2 for 31. One of them was a home
Ouch.
run, and I also hit a home run off him in the All-Star game. So I felt that counted for like 5 or 6 hits.
Darn right he did.
So yeah,
Wow.
I felt like statistically he wasn't fun. Steve Carlton wasn't fun. Guidry wasn't fun. Even though I was switch hitting, those guys were not fun. But there were, Fergie I hit okay. Yeah, Nolan I hit okay. I was 12 for 40. That works out to 300 against Nolan. But
Well, you remember that. You don't have to stumble on that one.
I knew that. But 16 of the outs were strikeouts, Dave. But I didn't feel bad because he
okay.
struck everybody out. So, I'm saying, well, I'm
Yeah,
hitting
okay.
300. What are you hitting against him? I faced a lot. You name a Hall of Fame pitcher from the 70s and 80s. I faced him. Gaylord Perry. I hit well against Gaylord.
How about Catfish?
Catfish, I got him 4 times. I got a good story for you. We're in St. Louis. I'm broadcasting Yankee games. We go there for an interleague game, and Bob Gibson's in the lobby of the hotel.
Oh boy.
So I woke up to Bob. I said, Bob, how you doing? He said, Hey, Ken, how are you? Good to see you, man. You know, Gibby had a reputation. He's not a nice guy. You know, he's kind of mean out there. So he was nice as he
Especially
could
for
be. You know,
hitters.
he introduced me to his wife. He said, This is my wife, so and so, and so. And then the conversation changed. He looked me right in the eyes. I used to have problems with you. And I said, Bob, I never hit a home run off you. He said, Yeah, you did. You hit one off me in spring training. I said, That didn't even count. But then I went back and I checked. I hit 373 against Bob Gibson, you know?
Get
Yeah,
out.
so he was right. You know,
Yeah,
he,
how
he
many?
had problems getting me out, you know, so yeah,
373
you
against
know,
Gibby?
there's got, you know, I hit
Oh
well
my
against
God.
Gaylord. I hit a couple home runs off Marichal, who was my favorite pitcher growing up. I got a good story about him too. Um, he invited me to his golf tournament years and years ago. And
Okay.
so he introduced me to his wife too. And, you know, as a young player, I hit a couple home runs off him. And conversation changes. He says, I didn't like young guys hitting home runs off me. And, you know, you hit that long one in New York off me. He says, I wanted to hit you. I wanted to drill you when you got to San Francisco. But he said, my wife thought you were cute, and I couldn't do it. And she's standing there, and she says, "Yeah, that's right. If he had hit you, he'd been in big trouble."
Oh my goodness. Favorite Yankees moment.
Well, anytime they win the World Series and get in that ring, um,
Yeah.
you know, they are kind enough to give the broadcasters rings too when they win the World Series.
You got five?
Say again?
How many do you have?
I've
Five?
got four. The reason I only got they won four times while I was there, but the only reason we got three is because one of our broadcasters, I don't want to mention his name, popped off about getting a ring, and George Steinbrenner said, "No, we're not giving them that year." So we didn't get one.
Oh,
So, but I have four altogether. I got one with the Orioles and three broadcasts. And I got four kids, right? Uh, when the time comes, they're each going to get one, but they all know that the Oriole one is the one that means the most because I was playing. So I can't designate who gets that one. They're going to have to pick a name out of a hat to see who gets it. I got three sons and a daughter, and yeah, that's how it's going to work. Yeah, I've already got that
all
laid
right.
out. You know, I can't designate who gets one. You know, so
Best meal in New York City, Ken.
well, I haven't been in a while. There used to be a sushi place right across the street from where I stayed in mid Manhattan, and I used to love that place. I used to go in there, took my family in there when they were in New York. There's a story with that place too. When Matsui was playing for the Yankees, I went in there one day to have dinner, and the owner said, "Do you know Mr. Matsui?" I said, "Yeah, I know Hideki." He says, "You think you could get him to come to my restaurant?" So I said, "Yeah, give me your business card. I'll take it to the stadium." Now Matsui in those days, his English wasn't that good, so his interpreter was there. So I was explaining to his interpreter, Hideki standing right next to him, about this restaurant in Midtown, um, you know, Japanese restaurant, good sushi. And out of the blue, Hideki says, "Are they real Japanese people?" And because sometimes, you know, these Asian restaurants, they serve sushi, but they're not Japanese people. I said, "Yeah, they're Japanese. I've been to Japan a few times. I understand. When I can hear Japanese, I know it's Japanese." So I gave him the business card. About a month later, I go in the restaurant. I walk in, the owner's all over me. "Hey, Ken, how you doing? Oh, you think the Yankees are going to win tonight?" I said, "Oh, they're probably going to win." I said, "Did Matsui come?" He said, "Oh, yeah, he came in. It was great." Matsui's pictures on the wall. He said, "Whatever you want tonight, it's on the house." so, so that was one of my favorite restaurants. Uh,
I know exactly where it
yeah,
is. Yes,
and
sir.
there's
Yes, sir.
another one. Hills something on Second Avenue, another place that I used to love going. Uh, they had great steaks in there. It was, and I got to know the people in there too. You know, just you it's funny. You go around New York and you walk in a store or a restaurant or somewhere, and people get to know your voice. They don't expect you to be in there. I've gone into restaurants and convenience store, and I ask for something. The people look up right. Whoa, it's you! Oh, we watch you every night. Are we going to win tonight? Stuff like that. They get to know you. That's going to happen to you too, Dave. I'd walk down the street on Lexington Avenue, cab driver pull up, roll down the window when I was working with Cott, because Cott and I had a thing going, hitter against a pitcher, because he was a pitcher, I was a hitter. And the cab driver said, "Don't let Cott get on you about the hitters." And then just drive off, just stuff like that. It's a great time to work.
You guys were great
You're
together.
gonna love it. I mean, I'm so happy for you. When I heard that news, I had to text you to make sure it was true. And it's just I can't say enough. We'll see you in Baltimore. I don't know if I'm going to get up to Yankee Stadium, but definitely when you get down.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys down there. Kenny, pleasure. And folks, thanks for joining us here on another edition of the Hey Now podcast. We'll see you.
Happy New Year, guys.
Hi, everybody. Dave Sims from the Hey Now podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us here on the Hey Now podcast.
Hey.